Hello and welcome to the Read to Know podcast, where the goal is to actually remember what you read so then you can better apply it to your life. On this podcast, we go through a book one chapter at a time, and then we actually practice remembering what we've read. So if you want to follow along, we're currently working our way through Bob Goff's book, Dream Big. I'm Zach Brown, and my friend Chris Yarber is joining me to help discuss and break down this book. Also, if you're on Apple Podcasts, it would be huge if you left a rating and review for us. It would help out a ton. If you're not on Apple Podcasts, no worries. Just send this to a friend who might be interested. Anyway, thanks again for listening and enjoy the conversation.
So, Zach, every single episode, which I'm kind of jealous that it's in your corner, not in mine. I mean, I do have this awesome duck here, but which I need to name. I love this duck. I don't know why it enthuses me so much, but I like it. Anyway, you have had this okay sign in the back. So if you're watching on YouTube, then you see the okay sign. If you don't, you'll just have to trust us that there is a lit okay sign in the back. Where did you get this sign from?
Yeah, I just got it on Amazon. Oh. Just looking for something. I got it before the podcast. I didn't get it just for the podcast specifically, but I got it, just room ambiance. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
This duck is specifically for the podcast.
Right. Yeah. For those of you listening, there is like a bronze or gold duck
that holds books. It's a bookend.
Chris. Yeah. And there's an okay sign behind me. So if not, you can go to YouTube and you can see what we mean if you're confused right now.
Right.
But yeah, speaking of that sign though, I would, if I could get, I think some point there's something I want to get, and I would retire the okay sign immediately. I saw this on Instagram. There's a guy that I follow, and his wife does like wood signs, like custom wood signs, but it was like really cool. It was made of wood, and it was like backlit with like nice LED lights and stuff. It looked really cool. I would love to get one of those for the podcast, awesome. Like Read to Know or RTK, or maybe just a custom neon sign. One of those two things, something like that. If I got something like that, I would retire the OK sign immediately.
Sweet. Maybe we should buy one for each book that we cover. Dream big,
Dream big and neon sign.
Yeah, neon sign, with the changing colors in the backlight. That's awesome, though. I mean, I'd love to see that up on that wall.
Right. It would look good up on that wall. I think it would.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to donate a neon sign or a wood sign, feel free.
Please.
Feel free.
We would love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll do a shout out on the episode an episode.
We'll give you a shout out. You can come on the show. If you donate a sign, you can come and join us for the next episode after that.
Let's do it.
I mean, I'll say that right now.
I love that idea.
Deal.
Thank you. I love that idea.
So if you do that, you come join us for an episode. And
you heard him,
that's
folks.
A done deal.
All right. Sounds good. I kind of want to make the sign now so I can be on the show. Anyway.
So you don't get kicked off?
So I don't get kicked off.
Just kidding. All right. Enough joking around. Let's get serious now.
Let's get serious.
Chase the Jeep, Chapter 7, by in Dream Big by Bob Goff. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between waving at Jesus and following him. What does that mean, Chris?
Well, he tells a really interesting story in here, which I want to save for when we open the book. But you see in this chapter where he gets that subtitle from. But really what we see, as you summed up this chapter, really this chapter could be summed up with kind of keep the main thing. In other words, set your sights on what's really, really important. And to Bob Goff in this chapter, he really talks about faith, and he also talks about relationships kind of intertwined. And he pretty much says, have tunnel vision on those things, which I'm totally stealing your words there as we were talking about this beforehand. But that's really what this chapter is summed up to be. Keep the main thing is how I would say it.
Right. And this Chase the Jeep analogy, it comes from the stories that he lays out in this chapter. And again, we can't tell Bob Goff stories better than Bob Goff. No. So if you don't have the book, grab the book and read it, at least for the stories, because they're entertaining at the very least. And they'll make a lot better sense to you than us trying to explain it to you.
Right.
But Chase the Jeep is basically what you said.
Yeah.
And I like this analogy that he also gives here, though, is that if you have to, imagine everything that you value, everything that's in your life is all in the same room. Relationships, spirituality, belongings, ambitions, dreams, thoughts, feelings. It's all, it's all there in the room. Now, empty out that room completely. And now, what if you only could bring in just a couple things?
Right.
2, 3, 10 things. What would be those things?
Yeah.
Once you figured that out, focus on those things.
Right.
Have tunnel vision for those things.
Yeah.
Center on those things. And then he says, crank it up. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's what he means here basically by chase the Jeep.
Yeah.
There's a difference between waving at Jesus and following him, in the sense that there's a difference between, I know Jesus, I go to church, and you're like, okay, I'm focused, I'm dialed in, that's what I'm chasing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the challenge of this chapter.
Right. Yeah. To put it in his language, that analogy is great. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's really, as he says, that's how you fast track your ambitions. That's how you get in the fast lane, in the left lane, in America, in the left lane, to fast track your ambitions, to keep chasing your dreams. That's how you start to do that quickly. And this is an idea. He says it very specifically in this chapter, but in the previous 3 questions that we answered and evaluated in 4, 5, and 6, you kind of see that language a little bit, that this is, if you want to dream big and chase that dream and that ambition, you really, really, really have to be focused on that, because it's about removing the distractions and as we said, being tunnel visioned on that. So
Yep. And he says, again, the key part of this chapter is, again, focusing on relationships. So again, another relationships kind of chapter, but focusing on the key relationship, which is that relationship between you and Jesus. Yeah. And he wants you to dial that up first and foremost, then dial up other key relationships past that.
Right.
And
I love how Bob in this chapter talks about Jesus as well. He has a really friendly and inviting way of doing that, because depending on what you've been taught or what you've heard, sometimes Christianity, Jesus can seem kind of threatening. Sometimes it's kind of threatening based off of what we've heard, but also sometimes because we just may not know a lot about Jesus and Christianity and stuff like that, church, whatever it may be. But he has a really friendly way of doing that, and reminds us of this in this chapter, that it's Jesus and God, his Father, our Creator, that created us and wants us to chase after our ambitions. What I've found in my relationship with him, and with others as well, is it's really not about what you can't do, but really it's being invited into freedom of what you can do, and chasing your ambition, because that was given to us, we believe, by God in the first place. So that gives us all the permission in the world to chase after that. Right. So I really like how Bob ties this in, and talks about Jesus and God in that way.
Yeah, he's basically saying that he's just as excited about your ambitions as you are.
That's right.
Maybe even more excited.
Oh yeah, I'd say more excited.
Right.
Yeah, because he already knows what we were created, what that dream and ambition is. He's kind of waiting or trying to wake us up, waiting for us,
right,
to really get on that track and
he's
start
not
moving
wondering
in that direction. No. Yeah. So I'm ready to get into the chapter if you are.
Yeah, let's open it up.
Yeah, because there are a couple things I really enjoyed. First of all, kind of looking back before we look forward in this chapter, he says, here's a quick aside, here's a tip worth remembering. He says that if you want to achieve your ambitions, don't be so eager to correct people, welcome them instead. So you're focused on other people, you accept them, you love them, again, others, and he says that starts with yourself, which reminds me of some of the other chapters he talked about when it comes to pushing through our insecurities. And in those earlier chapters, he talks about that more in depth, how we go about pushing through our insecurities. But it starts with yourself, accepting and loving yourself, and then being able to do that with others as well.
Right. And I think that stems, the reason he mentioned it, because I was kind of wondering when I first read this, why is he mentioning that and then moving into this kind of focus on your relationships, dial that up, is that you can't be worried about other people if you're trying to dial in your your key relationships right now. You can't be focused on other people and do that at the same time.
That's right.
And to really help one, it's just going to be beneficial for other people if we're not judging others immediately, and we're just welcoming them as they are and not worried about what they think, what their opinions are. And
you'll get a lot further in that relationship than you would if you were just to stop them in your tracks very early on in the relationship. And because really what that happens when we're not inviting and we're eager to correct, really that makes us come across as judgy, which nobody likes to hang out with judgy people. So.
And again, not to tie this to current events, but if we were able to do this, if we were all able, myself included, if we were all able to do this right now, I mean, we could get over some serious, difficult issues pretty quickly.
Yes, we could. Yeah, if we were all, especially, tunneled in, eyed in on what our ambitions truly are and our purpose as well. So, yeah, that's good.
Yep. So, moving on here, he says, when Jesus invited you on this adventure called your life, he did it so you could fill the ambitions he has for you to be fully alive and fully his. Mm-hmm. He also wants you to align your faith with your talents and chase after the sheep. Again, just another reiteration that our faith and our relationship with Jesus are aligned with our ambitions, desires, passions, etc.
Right.
You know what I mean? And our talents and skills. Like, those are aligned with that.
Right.
We don't have to basically... I think about this thing, your passion, like you're like, I gotta sacrifice my passion so I can follow Jesus. That's not what he's saying.
No,
that's not what he wants. That's not what he wants at all. You know what I mean? That passion is a part of it.
Right.
It's a big part of it.
And he actually says that the path to discovering and living your most beautiful life, your most beautiful lasting ambitions, you're going to have to activate your faith in order to do that. That you're going to have to give it all to him, talking about Jesus. And so Bob believes that living your most beautiful life, and chasing after those ambitions, that's where it really starts, is by activating your faith.
Right.
And if you're listening or watching and you've never really tried that before, I would say just try it at first to see how it goes. Because just from my experience, it really has. I mean, that's really, when I start with that and then go from there, that's really when the most beautiful things happen in my life. And your dreams, in a sense, are kind of clarified when you start with that activation of faith. So he mentions that there.
Yeah, and as he says, even bringing it back to previous chapters, talking about the faith thing, it ties into if the front door closes, find a window, or you're gonna make mistakes along the way. You're gonna screw up. You're gonna mess up. But the thing is, you have to continually still take that action, knowing that, and just trust that it's all going to work out in the end.
Right.
And that's where that faith comes into play.
Right. Yeah, and there's a reason why he asks us to start with that, because he says in this chapter that we won't be able to advance our worthwhile ambitions if our lives are already fully occupied. Going back to that analogy that you spoke of earlier with clearing the room and just putting a couple things in there. When we start with faith, it kind of gets rid of some things that are fully occupying our life, and gives us that tunnel vision that we need.
Right. And he moves on here to this next kind of section.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of the reason why I like Bob Goff, is that, I do like more complex, theology and, really digging into the scripture and what it means. But I also like Bob Goff's approach oftentimes is that he says we make following Jesus a lot more complicated than it needs to be sometimes.
Or even than what Jesus instructed.
Right.
Yeah, we make it a lot more complicated than even what he said.
Complicated theology isn't bad necessarily, but Jesus never said it was a prerequisite or qualification for the unschooled, ordinary people he invited to follow him. And that's the thing. We can get lost in the weeds. Sometimes getting down in the details and dissecting that is a good thing, but sometimes we just need to remember that overall things are pretty simple, and we just need to follow these simple, stick to the basics, or remind ourselves of the basics.
Right. So let's say that we do go through this process of kind of emptying this metaphorical room in a sense, which is ourselves. He gives in here 3 things that he would add back to this room. He said, I would add back to my life Jesus to begin. Then he says the second thing I'd add back to my life is a pretty easy pick as well. I'd add my family and my friends, which he talks about in length a good bit. And then he says the third thing is I'd add would be the things that add joy, purpose, and fulfillment to my life. And he says I'm not just talking about my vocation, because he says that the problem is that some of us spend so much trying to provide for our family that we're not providing for our family. And I love how he says that, because that makes you read that and it just makes you think. And if you don't have a family in a sense, as in a wife and kids, or maybe you're not living near your family, your mom and dad, brothers and sisters and stuff like that, then that could go for friends as well, that you're not feeding into those friendships, those other relationships in your life, because we're so busy trying to provide that we're not really providing emotionally, relationally, and mentally and stuff like that. So those are the 3 things that he would add back very quickly in his life,
right,
to begin with.
Yeah, and I like, again, that kind of putting the emphasis on, just because you do it for money doesn't mean that the other things that you do that aren't for money aren't important.
Oh no.
You know what I mean? And it's not like our life should not just be eat, sleep, pay the bills, and go to church or something like that. You know what I mean? There should be room for those other important things, those things that, again, bring joy and a sense of purpose to our lives, even if we're not making money out of it, or even if it's not providing some kind of immediate, visible, physical, tangible benefit.
Right.
Besides just kind of working on our spirit in a positive way.
Right. Yeah. AKA, for example, this podcast, right? Right. Is what I'm thinking of, is what I thought of when I said, because he says what adds joy and fulfillment. This is something that we both really love. This is something as friends we have in common, is this love for reading and exploring different subjects and learning and continuing to grow mentally and intellectually, and also spiritually as well. But there, of course, there's no financial benefit at the moment. But that's something that we're willing to add to our space, because it does bring something that is necessarily more important than just having a job and making money.
Right. I'll tell you right now, we're not making money off this.
No.
I'm putting money into this.
Right. That's why we asked you all for a sign. If someone wants to make us a sign. So that's
this is definitely a passion project.
Yes, it is.
But it's definitely worthwhile still.
Yes.
And that's what he's trying to get at here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Those things that don't seem, almost on paper, don't make sense.
Yeah.
I think.
Yes.
You know what I mean? On paper, you might look at that and be like, me, I'm so, that's my, if I say on paper, that's what I look at. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I'll throw feelings out the window most of the time. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't make sense on paper, I'm like, I can't compute. You know what I mean? Like, and that's something that he's talking about here. The things that probably don't make sense on paper end up probably being the more important things.
Right. As one last question as we come to the end of this, he says, here's even a tougher question. Okay, you can add those 3 things he gives us. He says, what is the 7th or 8th or 10th thing that you'd add back if you cleared the room of all the things you've collected in your life? And he says, honestly, I'm not sure if I even have room for a 7th. And that's just crazy to think about, that if we really were to get rid of this stuff and put those 3 things back in, then we could evaluate, okay, what else do we have time for? And when I did that exercise of looking at those 3 things, I was like, well, yeah, I really don't have too much time for anything else. Family, friends, things that bring me joy and fulfillment. That's why I mentioned this podcast as an example. And then also my job on top of that. I'm like, I really don't have time for a 5th or a 6th or a 7th thing. So that's a great, tough question for us to ask ourselves and reflect on.
Life fills up fast. Yeah. And it's like that thing, basically, he's talking about that analogy. I don't know if you've seen it, where people take like a cup of some kind, or a container, and they try and fit rocks in there.
Yes.
And if they start with the small ones first, the big ones don't fit.
Right.
But if you start with the big ones, you can fit all the little ones.
Right. And those 3 things he mentions are the big rocks, in a sense, going in a jar. Yeah.
So it's figuring out the big things first, focus on those, dialing those in correctly, and then you can add the extra things in.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what he's talking about here. He ends the chapter with the challenge of keep your eyes on the ball.
Yeah.
Right? Keep your eye on the ball. And basically, in the other analogy that he uses, chase the Jeep.
Yeah. Chase the Jeep. Yeah.
Which, if you, again, listen to the story,
you have to
understand
listen
what
to the
that
story.
means.
Yeah.
You'll understand what that means. So that wraps up chapter 7, Chase the Jeep. Tomorrow is chapter 8. We're week 2.
Week 2.
Week 2 starting tomorrow.
That's right.
Chapter 8, getting to the new part.
It's going to be good.
Yep. Thanks, guys, for listening. We'll see you tomorrow for chapter 8.